Hi, I'm Ruvir Surya. I'm the CEO of Ready at Dawn Studios and the creative director of the Order 1886, and I'm here to answer your questions. Yes, I mean we of course had to build London with its landmarks. So you'll definitely see Big Ben, the Westminster Bridge, the actual Palace of Westminster as well. Big Ben is part of it, of course, but in the distance you'll recognize a few other ones like St. Paul's. You get to go to the London Hospital, so that's pretty cool too. But yeah, there's quite a few of them actually around in the game. I think a few come to mind. As a matter of fact, we talked about although we knew that we wanted to make a third-person shooter, we talked about the cool things we could have done. There's of course the more open world kind of game. London would be an amazing place to actually just visit, like just to go around. There's so much mystery in London that it's like the perfect setting for an open world game with like all these different storylines. We went from sometimes wanting to put like certain RPG elements in there. We shied away from it because we didn't want to deter from the story-driven action game that we wanted to make. But I think an RPG would fit well. I don't know. Sky's the limit sometimes when it comes to creating an IP. It almost seems like there's lots of parts of the IP itself at large where you can probably make like little games out of everything, or even big games out of little areas in the IP. There were so many influences. I mean, the inspiration came from, I think people will be surprised to find out they came from places that normally people wouldn't think of. I think visually, we usually try to, inspire ourselves from the era itself, but even stylistically on the visuals, because we took some liberties with how we wanted the world to look, not just completely realistic, a little stylized. We went to the old masters, and the modern ones as well, but people like John Singer Sargent, the paintings that he's done, I think influenced a lot of how we wanted the world to feel in its texture. We took influences from books, of course, written at the time. Dickens was a big influence actually when it came to the way London was depicted and the way we want to replicate some of the way he depicted it. But we also took inspiration from other games when it came to like little moments that we really liked in games that we felt like that was really cool. That was a great way to actually make the story progress and move forward. We had movies that we took inspiration from. A few of them are Alien, for example, just purely that feeling of claustrophobia when you're in the first Alien, the suspense moment. I mean, Alien is still the greatest horror story, one of the greatest horror movies done in space. I know people don't think about it as horror, but like it's got that horror feel to it. Blade Runner, for example. Blade Runner purely because sometimes even Galahad, we used to call Galahad the Victorian Deckard, because he has that in him, in his character traits. But yeah, it came from so many different places, and we wanted it to come from different places because this game was kind of an idea that came together because of the influences, because of all of our backgrounds, literature, photography, cinematography, movies, games, everything that we could get our hands on. The game will actually take, what people expect out of a single-player game. It's really hard sometimes to give hours, because people have a tendency to play the game very differently. But I think people will just find out that it plays very much like all the other single-player, like the big single-player games that they've played in the past. So yeah, I mean, playing on different modes, whether you have the chance to actually play it on easy for the people who actually want to really have more of an immersive story experience. They'll probably want to pick easy if they're not core gamers that want to do a lot of combat and shooting and kind of get through easier. Normal, of course, is what most people will play. And there's also a hard difficulty that will really give a challenge to the guys who actually and girls out there who love range combat, good melee combat, and want to get more of a core gameplay experience out of the game. When we started, we discussed what this game was going to be, not only genres. We were kind of more focused on what the genre was going to be at the very beginning, but the question remained was whether or not multiplayer or co-op was going to be a part of this. And very early on, we decided that it shouldn't be. It's the first game in the IP. It's the very first one that we wanted to give to people and invite them into this world and kind of show them a little bit more about this world. And whichever way we looked at it, we couldn't do that job had we done it in a multiplayer setting or a co-op setting, because we'd have to sacrifice a lot of the kind of the reveals that we would have made. And also the second thing was that, to do true justice to a game that has multiplayer and co-op, we, at least as a studio, always felt that we should have two separate teams doing it. It would have meant growing the studio way faster than we wanted to. So we were very conscious of the fact that we wanted to deliver a great single player experience, but that did not mean that this world is not capable of actually, harboring a co-op or a multiplayer experience. I think people saw what we kind of revealed to them very early on from the very beginning. With the first cinematic that we showed at E3, then we showed them the things that we wanted to show them in the game. The reality of what we showed was what we felt was different. We didn't necessarily go out there and go all right, we'll show you the core of the game, and everybody would have been happy, and they would have been all right, third-person shooter and this and that. But we always felt okay, they get it. They get the core game. They will understand that the majority of the game is going to be that, the core game that has shooter mechanics, melee mechanics, and all that. The QuickTime events was actually very localized to the few things that we showed. Actually, as a matter of fact, they don't happen that often. The QuickTime events are our way of doing something that I think people, often see them as a detriment to the game. I see it as a tool that we use to actually make something more interactive. The reality of a lot of the QuickTime events in our game are exactly what in other games would be a cinematic. You would just actually not even interact. You would just hold your controller and wait and be told the story. For us, doing QuickTime events was actually a tool to try and figure out, all right, this could be a cinematic, but it'd be cool if we made it kind of interactive. It doesn't use the core mechanics, of what you would expect, like, closing a gate, for example. It's very hard for a regular third-person shooter game where you navigate and you can shoot a weapon, to actually get your hands on a gate and try to close it and all that stuff. It's well, how do you do that without doing something that is a cinematic? So you just do a cinematic then. But then there's no interaction. There's no, can you win or lose? Where's the middle ground? How do you find a way to make that interactive for the player? And QuickTime events are really that. They're not blanketed. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's the other way around. They're where they need to be, and the rest of the game and the majority of the game is the core game. It's just a way for us to keep the player kind of involved at any given time, telling them, hey, don't put the control down. You never know where you're going to basically have to press a button or do something just to advance what you're doing. But all in all, it's part of this kind of whole bigger story that's happening. And the story of 1886 is that it's the first step into understanding what the bigger story that has been happening for hundreds of years is.
Look out!
Sir Galahad, this matter is not yet over.
Of that you can be sure.